and it was getting to be very frustrating. And I was like, what am I going to do? And she had only been there a year, so her schedule wasn't fully booked out, and it was a new location, and we were building up. And I thought, you know what, I'll get a scribe, and I'll try to see, for at least a month or so until we can get somebody in here, I'll try to see her patients too. I don't want to cancel her patients. And brought somebody in to assist me, and I found I was able to see almost all of her patients. We didn't have to cancel that many, and if I had somebody in the exam room helping me. And I remember being in school and, 1 an hour was hard to do. And I remember getting out of school those first few years and, 20 in a day, I was proud when I got to 20 a day. And I remember having days where I did almost 30. And, my partner and I, after work, would talk to each other and talk about how busy a day it was seeing, 28, what a busy day it was. And now that's a slow day for me.
Hello and welcome to the Chris Wolfe Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with my friend, Dr. Peter Cass. Actually, Peter and I know each other quite a ways back. I would say I probably first met Peter in 2012, 2013, to my recollection. He may not remember it. But anyway, we talked a lot about staffing issues and also how to ramp up your patient schedule and still take really good care of patients without detracting from the level of services that you can provide. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. My patients with macular degeneration want clear and succinct recommendations from me related to products and solutions that can benefit their long-term ocular health and vision. To do this for my patients, I need to be confident that what I'm recommending will have a benefit to them. And that's why my supplement of choice is MacuHealth. MacuHealth is specifically formulated and clinically proven to rebuild and maximize macular pigment over a lifetime. This results in enhanced visual performance and aids in the treatment and prevention of age-related macular degeneration. I've discussed carotenoid absorption on this podcast with Dr. Nolans and Stringham, and MacuHealth uses a patented process called micromicelle technology. And this technology is clinically proven to increase carotenoid concentrations at the target tissue and deliver the highest level of bioavailability studied to date. MacuHealth has been great for my patients. We really feel like we have the ability to help those patients in all categories of macular degeneration. If you're not utilizing MacuHealth for your patients, check it out for yourself by contacting your MacuHealth representative. I want to discuss the MyDay toric contact lens for a minute. When I'm reaching for a daily lens for my patients, I need to know that it will be available in parameters that I want, and it needs to work. This improves my chair time and my patient satisfaction. The MyDay toric features the same optical lens design features as the most prescribed monthly replacement toric lens on the market. MyDay toric now completely mirrors the Biofinity toric's parameter range. To be clear, if you find the parameter in a Biofinity toric, you can find it in a MyDay toric. This toric lens design is multifaceted to ensure optimal visual acuity, lens stability, fit, and comfort. Its uniform horizontal ISO thickness and wide ballast band quickly orient the lens for better performance and simplified fitting. The MyDay material is CooperVision's softest one-day silicone hydrogel lens and features Aquaform technology combining a unique balance of high oxygen permeability and natural wettability. The result is a highly breathable lens that keeps our patients' eyes looking clear, white, and healthy. So if you haven't started utilizing MyDay toric in your practice, I'd encourage you to reach out to your CooperVision representative to get started. Let's then talk a little bit about staffing, Peter. How do you go from, there's a lot in this question, but how do you go from, let's say, seeing 20 patients a day to 50 patients a day? For most people, that's going to be unfathomable. What are your kind of keys to that?
So like with most things, you probably need to take it one step at a time. And like often with a lot of great ideas, it started out of necessity. And so I'm in a medium-sized town, Beaumont, and about an hour 30, the way I drive, about an hour from Houston. And so all the students, when they graduate, I'm faculty at adjunct faculty at U of H, teach practice management. And every year when I ask them, where do you want to practice? How many of you want to practice Austin, Houston, Dallas? Like 99 hands go up. And, then how many of you want to practice outside of Austin, Houston, Dallas? And like, one hand goes up. And, they probably want to be in a big city in another state.
Right.
And so it's very hard to get docs to medium-sized towns, and even harder to get docs into kind of rural towns. And so I had what I thought was
And you consider Beaumont rural?
Not rural, medium size. So it's about
Medium size.
120.
Okay.
And it's nearly impossible to get them into rurals. Like you're talking, 7,000,
Yeah, I
10,000, like the East Texas towns. I've had lots of my colleagues call me and like, hey, can you talk to the students for me? And they've had some very attractive offers, but the students just aren't biting. I reviewed an offer for a smaller town, smaller rural town, just last week, and it was 180,000 first year out, with a 50,000 sign-on bonus and a $10,000 allowance for moving. So, yeah, that's a whole lot more than I started out.
Oh
So,
my gosh, me too.
but I mean,
that's light years.
that's what they're having to do to attract them into these smaller areas.
Yeah.
But,
So I'm going to tell the audience. So we have a lot of younger listeners on the audience, and this is how old I am, right? But my first job, in our practice, I made $85,000 a year, and that was 5 days a week. Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm younger than you, but that was 5 days a week. And in order for me to like make enough money to start paying back my loans faster, I worked an extra day outside of the office, and I even entertained, this is before I even started anything with, lecturing and board certification review or board review for the students. I even pondered working 7 days a week. Right? Like, do I have to do that to get out of debt and to get me into a different place? And so 85 grand. What was it for you, Peter?
It was, I think it was 75. And this was back in 2000. I graduated in 2000.
Yeah.
But I was letting the employer keep 10,000 of that as buy-in each month to eventually become a partner in the practice. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole. I mean. Yeah, we could totally discuss the kind of, I'll call them imaginative ways that you can get somebody back into the practice. That's one of them, honestly. Like, okay, well, I know Peter, you're a brand new doc and you can't come out and write this big check for the practice, but I want to be able to offload this practice to somebody. So that's a way to do it for sure. So then it's almost out of necessity, right? So you live in Beaumont, medium-sized town. Nobody rarely wants to come from a large school in a large city into a smaller or medium-sized town. So you're saying, look, we've got patients that we need to see. How are we going to?
Yeah. And I had what I thought was the perfect candidate. My accountant calls me one day and he goes, "Hey, I've got somebody I want you to meet. Let's go to lunch." And I said, "Okay." And she was a new grad. She was valedictorian, which honestly gave me a little bit of pause because sometimes the ones that are the best in class aren't necessarily the best in clinic. But she was really smart, had a wonderful personality, great relationship with patients. And she said, "Look, I've known her parents forever. Her parents live here. She's moving back here to be by her parents. She doesn't want to own a practice, but she does want to work full time, and she wants to settle down in Beaumont." And I'm like, "Oh, this is absolutely perfect. Like, she'll be here forever." And she hired on. She was so excited, and things were going great. And about a year later, she came to me, and she said, "Hey, I've got some bad news. My husband got headhunted by a law firm in Houston, and we're moving back to Houston." I was like, "No." And she said,
"But if you drive like me, you could be there in an hour."
And so as we grew later on, as I got busier and grew later on, I had somebody working for me who was driving 2 hours from Houston each way.
Wow.
So I've had that as well. But it's funny. One of my colleagues called me or texted me and he said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about her. She she's on her resume. She used to work for you, and she's applying here at my office in Houston. And I texted him back. I said, well, I can call you and talk to you at lunch if you want. I said, but my advice is hire her before somebody else does. And he said, never mind, we don't need to talk. And she's been with him ever since. And I'm still mad at him about that, but he's a good friend. But when she left, that was like the third time that had happened in as many years. And it was getting to be very frustrating. And I was like, what am I going to do? And she had only been there a year, so her schedule wasn't fully booked out. And it was a new location, and we were building up. And I thought, you know what, I'll get a scribe, and I'll try to see, for at least a month or so until we can get somebody in here, I'll try to see her patients too. I don't want to cancel her patients. And brought somebody in to assist me, and I found I was able to see almost all of her patients. We didn't have to cancel that many, and if I had somebody in the exam room helping me. And I remember being in school, and 1 an hour was hard to do. And I remember getting out of school those first few years, and 20 in a day. I was proud when I got to 20 a day, and I remember having days where I did almost 30. And my partner and I, after work, would talk to each other and talk about how busy a day it was, seeing 28. What a busy day it was. And now that's a slow day for me. And the big difference, I think, is just delegation. And so when she left and went to Houston, and I just had to do it on my own, and I started delegating out a lot of what we as optometrists do on our own, when we could hire a really good staff member and train a really good staff member to do. When I started delegating that out, I found that seeing patients became a lot more enjoyable, because I was a doctor with the patient, not a doctor and a technician with the patient. I found it was a whole lot more profitable, because most docs could see 50 to 100% more patients than they're seeing by delegating out 25 to 50% of what they're doing with the patient. And honestly, the patients like it better, because when you go to your general practitioner's office for a health check, he's not checking your blood pressure and your height and your weight. And when you go to your dentist, he's not doing the cleaning and doing x-rays and all of those things. But yet when people come to an optometry office, most optometrists think patients expect that, and they really don't. It was kind of eye-opening to me, the compliments we got on how more thorough the service was after I started passing stuff off to other people. So
yeah. I mean, so the same kind of situation happened to us. My associate, who's been with us now for like 6.5 years, almost 6.5 years, and she's awesome. And she had twins about 2 years ago, and so it was my dad and I and Lindsay, and then she had twins, and it was the same kind of scenario. I went from seeing, like, a busy day for me would have been 17 patients. And on the day, my dad was there on Thursday and Friday, and I was there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so I was seeing, my dad wanted to just see his patients. He was on his way out. He was ready to retire soon. So he didn't want to see any of her patients, and that was fine. But I was like, all right, well, she's got twins. She's going to basically, I think she was basically off effectively. She, was off from like January, more or less, till June. And we had all these patients that we needed to see. And so I didn't want to work another day of the week. I didn't want to come in on a Thursday or Friday and see those patients. I wanted to squeeze them into my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I had a scribe at the time, so it was kind of effective. I could do it. And I almost became a game, like, okay, well, how many patients can I see? We got up to 36. I was seeing 36 patients a day. Now, I was busy, super busy for me, but we could do it. And the same response to our patients was that, oh yeah, it's thorough exam, it's efficient, it's, all of those same kinds of things. And the other thing that you get really good at is, and this is where I think from a school standpoint, it is hard for students coming out of school to understand that you don't do everything. You don't have to take care of every single problem that a patient has during a one exam per year. Your goal Yeah, you and I have talked about this before, and but the reality is that this plagues the profession, and I think it really it it is something that gets ingrained in you during your training, and you can almost, I would say probably 80% of us never unlearn this because we're not conscious of it. Is
Mm-hmm.
that you're the idea is I have to do everything for this patient in one exam unless it's really bad
Every time, every
every
time.
time. Yes, and I got to do all these same things. My point is to say that what you realize is that you become much more efficient at saying, okay, well, let's find the stuff that is potentially a problem or is a problem, and then that comprehensive exam is just strategizing with the patient on how far do we go before we check in on this other thing and go and dive deeper into it. And that actually, from a practice standpoint, was very good for me to kind of have to ramp up like that. Not because I was doing the other stuff before, but it just shows you, like, if you just piecemeal down, because I don't have the time to dive into every single thing. I have the time to identify all the stuff,
Yeah.
but then it's more about identifying, discussing with patient, planning for what you're going to do to follow up with those other things. And that's a huge part of ramping up your services as well. We've got a student right now that it shows me she's great. I mean, she's very competent, but it's great. It's very hard for her to understand, like, you have a question you can't answer. You have a question that you can't figure out the answer to. Okay, well, what's my differential diagnosis?
Yep.
In those differential diagnoses, which ones are serious that I've got to figure out right now? Which ones can I figure out in a week or a month or 3 months or 6 months, and like keep the patient safe and also do the right thing by them, and then the right thing by the practice. That is so hard, Peter. So hard.
Yeah. One thing I found that helped me with that is when I'm looking at a patient and dealing with an issue with a patient is, do I know what this is, or do I think I know what this is? And if the answer is yes, okay, let's stop right there and let's try to treat this. And even if it could be something else, let's treat the obvious thing first, because sometimes you can have
Think
multiple,
horses, not zebras.
multiple diagnoses stacked on top of each other. And as long as you're not brushing off something life threatening or sight threatening, go ahead and treat what's most obvious. But step one, if you think you know what it is, stop right there and treat it. Step two, is if you're not sure what it is, but you think you might be able to do some testing to figure it out or something different, then schedule that. And step three is if you have no idea, well, you probably at least know what part of the eye it's in. Okay, right. I don't know what's going on, but I think this is neuro, or I think this is retina, or I think this is cornea. I don't know what it is. Send them out to somebody who does. And life got a lot easier when I approached everything like this. Either I know what it is and I'm going to treat it, or I kind of think I know what it might be. Let's do some tests. Or I don't have a clue. Let me get you to somebody who can figure this out. And that's a little bit of a maturity thing in doctors too, because I think the more experience we have, the more ready we are to admit that we might not know what something is and that we need a second set of eyes on it. So.
Yeah, and I think I think to expand upon those questions that you're asking, it's almost, the questions I always ask the student is, okay, well, what's your diagnosis? What's your tentative diagnosis? What do you want to do about that?
Yep.
And if you tell me you have no idea, what can you do to lessen that uncertainty, right? Is there something that you can do? Patient has this symptom or this sign. Is there something you can do? That's basically what you're saying. And if you can't, now it's like, all right, I have no idea. But the reality is that you can have that's a very small percentage. You can you should have an idea, and they all do. The real challenge is, how do you flip that memorization that they had for boards, and they know, okay, well, Maddox, okay, I got a patient with double vision. Well, there's Maddox rod, there is polarized lenses, but none of those things actually are. Yeah, but like, are you going to do them? Do you know when you're going to do them? Do you actually have a systematic approach to identifying them, or is it just like, oh yeah, I can, Maddox rod, that exists. Like, no, but how are you going to use it? That is very challenging. Very challenging.
You've been given a toolbox with your education, and now the trick is to pull out the right tool for the right job, and get the work done. And that can be tricky. because they going back to what we were talking about earlier, they want to pull out every tool every single time, and
Yes.
that takes a whole
Yes.
lot of time.
Bingo.
It
You're
takes a
never
whole
going to
lot of
see
time,
50.
and it can be very inconvenient. So
And it doesn't clarify the problem. That's the other thing, is that, obviously there's certain things that we're required to do from a comprehensive exam standpoint, contractually, from managed vision care, blah 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 blah. But
yeah,
like, outside of that, okay, well, like you said, well, which tool are you going to use? And when you pick a tool, it's always like, I'm going to do a test because I'm think it's this, right? You should have an idea about what you're going to gain, the information you're going to gain from a test, as opposed to what you'll see often is, well, I just want to do a macular OCT. A patient's not seeing very well. Let's do a macular OCT. Let's do a optic nerve OCT. Let's do it. It's like, wait, look at their capsule, right? Look at their posterior capsule. Is it foggy at all? Is their cornea? Do they have any SPK on their cornea? Do they have any Fuchs? Do they have any? I mean, like, let's think about all those things first, instead of just blasting test after test after test. Have an idea about the symptoms and the signs that you're seeing.
yeah, and just work your way front to back and see what you see, and
Yeah.
then test based on that.
All right. So efficiencies. Okay. So you hire a scribe, you realize your efficiencies, your patients are happier. So that probably gets you to, let's say, 30, 35 patients a day. You're pulling some triggers. You're pulling some pretty significant levers. If you're 50 a day, that puts a patient every 10 minutes?
So what we actually did is I wanted to make sure that I was making the most of that time and scheduling properly, and so I actually set up two separate schedules. So I had one schedule that was my main schedule, and it was every 15-minute comprehensive exams, and then I had a second schedule that was everything else, and that was a big help as well, because when you ask doctors, how many patients, and PCS, we've done practice evals and practice valuations. And so in the evals, we go in and look at practices and look at their numbers and kind of, help them. In the past, we did that. As we've grown, we've kind of, that's one of the services we don't provide anymore. But in doing that in the past, we would, often ask doctors, how many patients, per hour are you seeing? And that number's always like, oh, I see 4 an hour or 2 an hour. But if you run the MBA, if you look at the MBA numbers, it's 1.16. And everybody's like, no, I see more than
average.
one. Everybody, yeah, the average is, and everybody's like, no, I see more than 1.16. Well, you may schedule more than that, but there's, you've got to end them early at the end of the day, so that you can't schedule up till 5 p.m. because those patients have to get worked up and put in a room and seen and through the optical and out the door. And so, there's some gaps there. You also need a lunch. Some of those patients are going to cancel, some are going to no-show. And then also you're going to have spec checks back, you're going to have contact lens checks back, you're going to do glaucoma pressure checks, you're going to have patients come in with foreign bodies. So you start adding all that in, and that's how that number whittles down to about 1.16. And I didn't want that, because just from a purely practice economic standpoint, your most valuable patient is going to be your comprehensive exam, because those are, just from a numbers perspective, those are the ones that are going to generate the most revenue typically in your practice. There may be, like some ortho K patients and dry eye patients and things like that that'll kind of outpace those other numbers. But in general, your comprehensives are your most valuable patients in the practice. But at the same time, I wanted to practice full scope, and I wanted to see all the medical cases. And so that was my second schedule, we called it problems, fits, and follow-ups. And so that was, and so we had one schedule that was comprehensive and one that was problem, fits, and follow-ups. And then as we kept refining that process more and more, we created a third schedule, and that was a special testing schedule, and it was scheduled under my staff member. And so I didn't have to anymore, didn't have to put those special tests on my schedule. We put them on my staff member's schedule. And then she, and this goes back to training, but she was so well trained that, she would do all the testing, and then she would pull up the chart, and she would do a tentative interpretation and report. We had a form for it. And a lot of that stuff is straightforward. Like, your tech can absolutely,
Sure.
like, why is the patient here? Well, that should be on the order in the previous exam or on the chief complaint. So they can put that in. Well, they know the date, they know the test they did, and they know the reliability of the test. It's right there on most of the tests, 8 out of 10 on an OCT, or, 2% fixation loss, whatever, on a visual field. So they can start putting that in. They know the cooperation of the patient because they're the ones that worked with the patient. And so by the time they've put all that in, which is just data, there's no brain power really behind that. It's just data.
It's the technical component of the test, right? The
Yeah,
TC and not the 2.6.
Exactly. That's all there. So then, what's left is assessment and plan. Well, when you've got a really well-trained tech, I told her, have fun, take a shot at it, see what you think it is. And, if they had large cups and it's all red on the OCT and there's peripheral loss on the visual field, well, she's going to write in, glaucomatous optic atrophy as the assessment and plan. Like, she knows I'm usually going to start with the prostaglandin analog, and she would try to put that in. And then, of course, that's up on the screen when I come in, and that's totally for me to look and review and write over. But when she got it right, I'd be like, hey, you did a great job. And she was, really proud of herself. And when she got it wrong, I'd say, oh, hey, you were close, but this, and I would show her. And she really enjoyed doing that, and it made my job so much faster because 8 times out of 10, I'm like, hey, you got this right. And I just, save it and turn and talk to the patient. And so I spend my time talking with the patient. And all those patients never even went in an exam room. They stayed in the special testing room, and I would come in there and charts on the screen, review the chart real quick, talk with the patient real quick. And then another thing that we did is we actually turned the scribe into an assistant. And because I found that if your techs are doing a really good workup, the majority of your documenting is in your history. And you can a lot of times with Crystal, my favorite practice management software, and Ifinity, you can a lot of times automate your assessment and planning. And so that part's fast. And so really the only part that you've got left that takes some time to fill in is the refraction. Well, you don't need 2 hands to do a refraction. And so I'm literally typing in the refraction as I'm refracting, on the refraction screen. And so there's not a whole lot of documentation that I have to do. So when I'm finished, I can talk with the patient. Didn't really need a scribe. Where I found it was really useful is we put a pager system in all the lanes. And as I'm getting near the end, about to do my recap with the patient, I hit the pager. The tech comes in, and they know to just open the door, stand there quietly, and they know that if I need, hey, I'm going to start this patient on drops. Would you check the cabinet? They'll go check the cabinet for drops and coupons, or if if this patient's ready for contact lenses, I'm going to jot note on the routing slip, and they're going to take the patient to contacts and pull contacts, and then find a contact lens tech to give the patient to, and then I'm on to the next room. And so I found that having an assistant like that was super helpful. And then, if it's a patient that I'm having, trouble getting them to hold their eye open for foreign body, I can hit the button and they're going to come in and help hold the patient's eye open. I found it was even easier to have a tech in for inserting membranes than to use a speculum, and just have the tech hold the eye open while we put the membrane on. A trick I learned from Craig Thomas. He said he started doing it because he was abrading corneas occasionally with a speculum, or knocking a bandage lens loose with a speculum. But I just whatever. I needed the assistant for press the button. And then a lot of education, we say it over and over and over. If patient needs cataract surgery, like, hey, you need cataract surgery. Not a big deal. Outpatient procedure, takes 15 minutes. I'm going to have my assistant talk to you about the center we use, why we like them, and answer any questions you have. And that takes some training. That assistant's going to have to sit with you on several visits. It's probably really good to send the assistant to the surgery center, get them shown around, and have them take a tour. But when you do things like that, you can pass off so much education to the assistant. And then fee presentation. I found for dry eye, when I was trying to talk to patients about LipiFlow and why they need to come back for thermal pulsation therapy or anything like that, if I talked to them, probably 20% acceptance rate. if I said, hey, you need to have some stuff done, I'm going to have my assistant talk to you, and I had created a form in Crystal, and I would check off what they needed, print that out. The assistant would see that print out, and come in the room, and I was, Shannon's going to talk to you about all that. And I walk out of the room, the rate shot up to like 50-60% acceptance rate.
Yeah.
Doctors
patients
are
don't
generally
want their
very
patients
bad
don't
at
want
sales.
yes. Yeah, and patients don't want that either. I think we, again, like I've got a couple other questions for you that I'm just struggling with in general, and I know that some of our listeners will struggle with some others that I have. But we have this sense in a lot of cases that are like that we need to talk about money with certain things but not others. So
Mm-hmm.
one is like, you send a patient out and they pick out a new pair of glasses and lenses and it costs this much money. You don't expect that you're going to tell the patient how much their glasses and spectacle lenses are going to cost. You don't expect that. But
Yep.
for some reason, when we transition to LipiFlow or IPL or, anything else, we feel like this, like, I got to tell you
Or
the price.
non-covered
Yeah,
medically necessary services.
right. Right. And patients, and that's weird. And patients don't expect it, and it's not comfortable for the doctors. And it's not, I mean, of course, if some patient asks you that question, you can answer it. But we have this pull to be like, I'm going to over explain this because it's different. It's not any different than selling a pair of glasses from a standpoint of how you should manage it in your practice, I think.
And
And the other thing that we make,
I
the other
think that's a
mistake that we
key
make,
word too, the over-explain.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what having less time with the patient will have is like you can't over explain because I have to be more efficient. I have to choose my words precisely. And so I can't simply just keep going and going and going. And the patients don't find value in that. And so actually I want to ask you a question because I do feel like this sense of I want to if I were going to ramp back up to 36 patients a day or 40 patients a day,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would have to ask my patients a lot less personal questions related to just how they're doing and what's going on in their lives. I worry about that. How do you manage that?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, I do find myself at times, especially if I'm a little behind, you get that one 90-year-old patient that's on, 14 different medicines and can't hear and speak Spanish only. And now you're trapped in there for a long time, and you go out and now there's 4 or 5 charts waiting for you, and
right.
So I get that where I feel like I'm rushing through it and don't have time to talk. But it is nice to talk and visit with the patients, and how's your husband doing? How's the kid? Did your kid get married? Yesterday one of my daughter's best friends, my daughter's gone and moved away, and this other one of her best friend's mom came in, and so we were both talking about the girls, and so it's nice to be able to have that time to visit as well, and it's got to be a balance, but I find the more I delegate to the staff, the more time I have just in general with patients, and really I think as a doctor you need to do the minimal amount of data gathering that you can.
Correct.
You minimal amount. Let your staff do that. Train the staff. And I've referenced that a couple times now, and to kind of complete that out, we had a bonus system, and you were not eligible to get a monthly bonus. It was a collection based on great game of business, but you weren't eligible to participate unless you were certified in something, and it could be ABO for opticians and lab people, and then it could be JACAPO for techs, and it could be AOA, but you had to be certified in something. And then once you got certified, we framed your certificate and put it on the wall beside your photo. And you were now eligible to participate in the bonus system. And bonuses could be sometimes $500 a month for every staff member. And so they were very motivated to get certified and stay certified. And so we had really well trained staff, and we had a training process and documents, and we would go through and train them to do things, and we'd have somebody who knew myself or somebody who knew how to do it really well, teach them to do it. We'd have them observe us doing it, and then we'd observe them doing it. And then eventually when we felt comfortable, we'd let them do it. But we delegated out everything that we could. And And then we got software that was as efficient as possible and made sure everything was documented well. And so essentially, I'm going in a room and I'm reviewing the history with the patient. I'm reviewing the chart. I'm doing a refraction and I'm doing a slit lamp exam. And that's pretty much it. And so because I'm doing so little data gathering, I have time to talk to the patient about, what's going on in their life, and I have time to talk to them about the problems. And it kind of balances out, because if somebody comes in with a lot of problems, they really don't want to talk about their kids,
Right.
last soccer game. They want to talk about, why does this eye hurt so bad? It feels like there's a lash in it. They want to talk about that. Well, you've got time to talk about it. And if everything's fine, if it's a 45-year-old that you saw last year who's successfully wearing a soft multifocal, and you're going to bump it a quarter in one eye, and everything else is healthy, that's a 2-minute refraction and maybe 2 or 3 minutes, looking in the eye. Well, you still got, even if you're doing 10-minute exams, you've still got 5-6 minutes to just visit and chat about anything. And so that the more you delegate, the more time you create for yourself. And I tried to have it where all I was doing was refraction and internals and externals. And I was really even thinking about getting like an automated refracting system so that we could even speed that up even more.
The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education, for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com. One of the challenging things with patients is when they invest in a really high quality pair of glasses and customized lenses, it can be challenging to keep those lenses clean, keep them scratch-free, smudge-free. And so we now have the ability with Crizal Sapphire HR lenses to offer our patients the best-in-class anti-reflective coating in a way that is really high resistance so that they're not having to care for their lenses as much as when those lenses are caring for them. So remember that you can provide patients that best in quality, best in class transparency, clarity, durability, and UV protection in a single Crizal coating. If you want to learn more about Crizal Sapphire HR, contact your Essilor account executive or visit essilorpro.com/Crizal. Yeah, I think those are great tips. The last question I'll ask you then is the other thought I think a lot of listeners are going to have related to this is, look, Peter, this is going to require more staff, and it's hard for me to find new people who want to do these kinds of tasks. So where are you going to find them? What's your answer to that?
It is hard to staff up. We always posted on a local site. A lot of communities have sites for classifieds and job seeking and stuff like that, and that worked really well for us. And we kind of had a tiered approach where the first round we looked at the resumes and set aside the ones that we didn't like, called the ones we liked with a phone interview, and then the ones that did well on the phone interview would come in for an in-person interview, and then the ones the office manager liked would get a second interview with me, and then the office manager and I would independently come up with our ratings. And by doing that, we generally that process helped us hire people that were really good. And then one of the keys to keeping people that are really good, because it's hard right now, is treating people like you'd want to be treated. And we tried to be very flexible on policy. We tried to have employee first policies. My goal was to pay them base salary more than any other eye care practice in the area, base salary, and give them a bonus on top of that. And that meant my payroll costs were a little higher. Instead of running 20%, we're running 22, 23%. But like turnover was almost non-existent in our office. We had probably one of our shortest people there was like 2 years. And, we had several that were there 5 years or more, several that were there 10 years or more. We also just try to do nice things for people, and we try to think about things from their perspective. If there's bad weather, do we really need to be open in bad weather? Can we just let them have the day off? And I'm sure that's a issue
you
face
rain.
quite a bit.
You mean rain? Rain and a little bit of ice.
So if we get a little bit of rain and ice, it's the Wild West out here. Like people in Texas like lose their minds. It's there was when there was sub 20 temperatures 2 weeks ago. The street where my street hits the highway, that overpass iced over, and there was a 40-car pileup at basically the end of my street. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured, but there's actually a video on Facebook of a 18-wheeler going over the overpass, turning sideways and sliding sideways, and then straightening it back up just to plow into the entire group of cars that were there. When you see that, and you see one of the cars just get totally crunched. It's really scary, but fortunately no one injured. But so Texans are not good in the ice. I know where you're at. You deal with that.
They need the day off.
So,
No, I think those are all really good.
It's about treating them right.
I agree.
When it was somebody's birthday, we bought a cake every time. And when the office was smaller, we'd close for lunch, take them all out to lunch. We'd try to do team retreats. We'd try to have fun nights. One of the things that I think was the most effective is every now and then my optician would come to me and she'd go, "It's a rough day. Can we get coffee?" And I'd pull up my business card. I'd go get the orders, go get coffee for everybody, and stop at the cupcake place. And she'd come back with 14 coffees and 28 cupcakes, and suddenly it's a little bit better day. And and it's just, if you treat them right, you'll retain them. And then if you get them trained and let them do stuff, most employees really enjoy, instead of just taking a history and moving on to the next one, they like to do those tests. They like to feel like they have some value in the process. And the more I hand it off to them, the more they enjoy that. And we had very loyal employees. It's a little harder post-COVID, but it can be done.
Yeah, I think all of those points are really great and really important. And I'll add one other thing is like what you're talking about. We've never had a hard time hiring technicians. Those are relatively, I would say, easy to hire, but you can find really good people that want to do that work. The harder one I've always found has been the opticians. And for some reason, I think that just the technical aspects of being an optician and selling, if you take managed vision care, selling one pair of glasses 3 or 4 different ways based on the managed vision care plan, that's really hard. And so anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
And that'd be a whole different topic. I just had this conversation in practice management class. I said, really, as a doctor, you kind of have as an eye doctor, you have a neat benefit of being able to have a second business in your office. One business, which you're training for, is to be a doctor, and then a second business, you get to help people with these eyewear products. The problem is now you've got to manage that as well, and most of us aren't great at that because it's a retail business, and essentially that's what you're doing is you're marrying a service business, a medical care service business with a retail business. And it can be done well, but it's tricky. And those opticians are hard to find. When you do find somebody that's good, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier was remote workers. And if you find somebody that's good, in one area, but their job could maybe be given to a remote worker, you could promote them and move them into an area where they might be more effective in the practice, and then pass off their job to a remote worker. So that's an option as well, because it is getting so tough to hire people. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, Peter, thanks for coming on and talking today. You and I and Joe and I, the plan is to do a lot more of these types of discussions because I think they're really helpful. We'll have plenty of time to talk about some of those other topics. So tell everybody where they can find you, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. You're a great host, and somebody that's a lot of fun to just have a conversation with in general. But Practice Compliance Solutions helps practices comply with healthcare regulations in the areas of HIPAA, which everybody's familiar with, OSHA, fraud and abuse, which is correct billing and coding guidelines, which is why we kind of tie in so well with iCode, and then we also do HR compliance as well. And so we can be found online at pcscomply.com. And we have packages there for all of those major compliance areas. And we try to make it as simple as possible. We offer an option where you can kind of do it yourself, and you read a management training module, really short, simple, written in plain English, answer some questions about your practice, and show the staff some videos. And the app records all that, creates all your documents, does everything for you. And then, as you're familiar with, we can also come to your office. You get Joe and BJ, and sometimes me in the office, and we'll inspect your office. We'll do it we'll do it like an angry, upset auditor might do it, but with a smile on our faces. And then instead of asking you to write a big check or putting you in handcuffs, we'll tell you how to correct the issues that we see in your office and get you compliant and keep you there.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Peter Cass, thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it, Chris.